expert, the guy. Matty's got jokes and a wild ride. 30 minutes, no time to spare. Stack your lineup, win anywhere. NFL SuperCoach Halfa. Get your edge, get faster. Taylor leads, Matty's laughter. NFL SuperCoach Halfa.
For the Aussie Gridiron Network, this is the NFL SuperCoach Halfa. I'm Matty C, and with me is Australia's most brilliant SuperCoach player and NFL mind. It's Taylor Goodall. Welcome, mate.
Matty, SuperCoach NFL is going to be so big, it's going to create a ripple. And if you think you're excited, feel these nipples. Let's go.
I felt like you might have been teeing that up to a rhyme. You pretty famously do the rhyme on our NFL fantasy show. I love that you've brought that to this new concept, mate.
I like it. You heard ripple and you're like, hang on.
Yeah.
He's chucked that in so he can rhyme that shit. But, mate, I cannot be more excited to be here. You know me. I obviously love my NFL fantasy. You and I do the show every week and got over 400 episodes to show that. But the fact that basically two of my worlds are colliding with my SuperCoach brain and how much I love doing the NRL SuperCoach and even delving into AFL and a lot of the sports on there. But for us to sort of take a crack at, talking to people out there that may have not sort of delved into NFL fantasy at all, or they've just sort of done the NRL SuperCoach, and for us to come in and just sort of talk about, the differences and, what you're looking for if you're trying to pick your team this year.
Yeah, because, it's a new thing for SuperCoach to be offering NFL, but it's not a new thing for you to be playing SuperCoach. You've got a wealth of experience and you continue every year. You finish really high up in the NRL version of that app. Haven't spent so much time with you on the Aussie rules end of it. But, mate, then we have been doing the NFL fantasy thing for so long. You and I have played together for 10 years. We've each been playing 15 plus. So the NFL part's kind of part of our DNA as well. One thing I just wanted to ask you about this is our fantasy show, we pump out 2 hours of content every week. This one's going to be a much shorter, punchier thing, right?
Yeah, the idea is even in the name. I think in a way that sometimes we let our NFL fantasy shows get away from us. I think anyone that's been on the show would agree with that. And what I basically thought was, if we put Halfa, a bit of an Aussie slang on the word for half an hour, I was like, you know what, that locks us into at least making the episodes be around half an hour, because otherwise we're just liars, and that's not who we are, Matty C.
No, we're definitely not, mate. And I like the idea that we're going to get in, we're going to give you some good nuggets, and then we'll get out. People are busy, and they don't have 6 hours a week to be dedicating to just doing all the research. They want it punchy. They want the ins, the outs. They want the good moves, and they want the strategy. Mate, that's kind of what's brilliant about this too, is the strategy for NFL fantasy where we come from is chiefly it's a draft format most you play. And then the closest you get to this format of SuperCoach is the folks who just play daily, where you pick a lineup on a salary cap just for that round. And then at the end of the round, you tip it all back and you pick a whole new team the next round with a new salary cap. This isn't like that. Explain the SuperCoach bit to us.
So I thought I would just sort of have a look at sort of the differences between NFL fantasy, the regular style that everyone's been playing for years and years, and NFL SuperCoach Classic. So there are a lot of differences. So I'm not just going to bore you with all of them. What I thought I would do is sort of throw out a couple that are sort of earmarked at, like me and you, Matty, say we know well that we're trying to pick breakouts. We're trying to pick guys that, whether we're in NFL fantasy or SuperCoach, we're trying to pick guys that are either lowly valued in terms of dollar amount, or they're basically lower in ADP or average draft position, that we're trying to pick where they're going to outperform where they are basically looked at by the public. So what I thought it was, there's a couple of little sort of ways that I'm looking at in terms of, NFL fantasy and SuperCoach and why they're different. So what I thought I would bring up is, when you're playing SuperCoach Classic, you're predicting a player to break out based on what they did on the previous season, and they are priced specifically on that. So they're obviously going to have an average of what they would have done. Obviously, NFL SuperCoach is new, but they've basically gone and found the exact data based off their point scoring and given them a price based on that. So what you're actually trying to do when you're sort of making your squad is you're trying to actually pick someone that's going to do far better than what they did last year, because obviously that's going to be the way they gain money. I'll give you an example, right? So let's say Lamar Jackson, right? You and I personally, we have him as quarterback 1 in our rankings. We think he's amazing, blah, blah, blah. he might not necessarily be an amazing pick off week one in NFL SuperCoach, because he's priced at what he did last year, which was a huge season, massive 40 touchdowns, ridiculous amount of yards. He kind of had an outlier season himself, compared to what he normally does. Not so much that he hasn't been an amazing fantasy asset, he has, but in terms of his passing...
Oh, and he'll continue to be, right? You're not saying he's all of a sudden fallen off a cliff and, Lamar Jackson, don't even bother with him. That's not what you're saying here either, right?
No, my point is that you and I have him as quarterback one. We think he's going to be amazing. But what you're more looking for is value in SuperCoach. You're trying to pick the guys that are going to go up in dollar value. That's not to say you can't have what they call keepers, as guys that basically are going to just churn out numbers every single week, and you basically keep them all season. I'm not saying you can't have a few of those guys in there. I'm just saying, just to show you the differences, is it doesn't necessarily mean he's great for week one. You might be able to pick him up for a discount in like week 6 if he hasn't sort of hit the ground running initially. But what I thought I would do is compare that to, say, regular NFL fantasy, whereas you're predicting a breakout based on the public's perception going into that season. So their ADP, or average draft position, like I just said. So you're really trying to work out what everyone basically that's playing NFL fantasy is thinking of a certain player, basically where they're getting drafted, and whether you think you do your own rankings, obviously, and you're trying to work out whether you believe that player is going to far exceed their expectations based off what everyone else believes. So, it's just a little bit different when you're sort of predicting your breakouts, is that, like obviously one's just over a public perception and one's actually about the exact data which happened last year, obviously, which is what SuperCoach is.
Well, and as the season evolves too, a player's value will change in NFL fantasy the way we play, right? Because then people go, oh, gee, that guy's performing well. Now all of a sudden he's more valuable. I'm less likely to trade him away. If I am going to trade him away, I want more back. Same's true in SuperCoach as well. Players' values shift.
Well, they do in terms of dollar value, obviously. So this is where it's different, right? Like, we're not trading with each other. We're not like sort of working out the stock market in that way. We are in dollar value, but not in terms of sort of trading with each other. And anyone that's obviously played SuperCoach Draft or NRL Draft, they'll know this. This is basically what regular NFL fantasy is. But when you're talking, the SuperCoach Classic style, it's very much just about picking a guy at a certain value, playing it like I just said, it is the stock market, and just basically picking them at the right value where they're going to essentially over the next 3 or 4 weeks well exceed that. And then you might actually use some of your trades. And obviously that's a huge difference in itself to regular NFL fantasy, is that you normally you don't obviously get like trades where you're essentially deciding to pick anyone from a pool and bring them into your team like you do in Classic. So generally you're just after in SuperCoach to find a guy that might go on a hot run and sort of get them before that. But that's actually what brings me to my next point, Matty.
Here we go.
One other thing I wanted to bring up in terms of big differences between the two.
Love it.
Obviously, in fantasy and regular fantasy, you're drafting, you're basically with that guy for the entire season unless he gets injured or you decide to trade them. Or if they start to falter and they're a late round pick, you just decide to just send them to the waivers.
Just cut them.
Whereas in SuperCoach, you can actually take players on a very smaller window. So let's just say, like, for example, like, let's say you did take Lamar, or I'll give you a better example.
Yeah.
Let's say I like Dak Prescott this year. I personally have him at quarterback 7 in my rankings, and the public perception or ADP of him is like quarterback 15, 16, 7. What I might do is I might actually take him early in the season instead of Lamar, because if you look at the price difference, I believe Dak's around 18 million and Lamar's about 30.
Yeah, so 28.8 or something. It's about a $10 million gap. A $10 million gap.
So what I might do is go, you know what, Dak's got a great matchup. He's got 3+ matchups in the first 3 weeks, not dissimilar to what people do in NRL. I'm not saying Dak does. This is just off the top of my head, but I might save that 10 million and go, you know what, I can spend that elsewhere. So I can actually, go Dak early for those 3 weeks. But the great thing is, if Dak then runs into the Philadelphia Eagles or the Denver Broncos, who have great defense, then all of a sudden you can flick him for someone else with your trades, because you get 2 trades a week. You get a boost for 4 different weeks. So you can essentially just get rid of him and bring someone else in. You're not married to these players. You can shift your team around. So that's obviously a huge difference between the two as well.
Yeah, and I think it took my brain a little while, having come from the NFL fantasy world, to understand that trade didn't mean me finding someone in my league to swap pieces with, like we're trading marbles in the schoolyard. It was that you are trading with the entire list of players who are available in the app, because your lineup is your lineup and players in your lineup can exist in every team in the league. So it just took me a little while to get used to it being an open system instead of a closed system, and that trading is between me and every player that's available in the league. So once I got those two distinguished, that made that a lot easier to handle. Mate, the other thing that's a little different about how we approach SuperCoach for NFL Fantasy and Classic, because it is such a shorter window, it means that you're really driven by different things to establish where value for a player is at different stages of the season. You just started to talk about that with the way that you might start with Dak early. If he's got a couple of good matchups, he's $10 million cheaper than one of the very, very top price quarterbacks, but you believe he can score at that level. So then you can spend that $10 million elsewhere. 3 weeks later, Dak increases in value. So now if you do sell him, you might sell him for $21 million after you'd bought him for $18. So now you've got $3 million in team value you didn't have. Trying to identify the player you bring in when you do trade away a player like that, there's a lot to consider, isn't there?
There sure is, Matty. And for anyone who is interested in a lot of this stuff that we're going to sort of bring up now, you can go through a lot of our catalogue, especially our preseason shows that we've just done. So obviously they're probably aimed more at NFL draft players, because obviously we're talking about ADPs and, obviously that style. But that's not to say that you aren't going to get a lot out of this for Classic. This is a Classic specific show, this Halfa we're doing.
Yeah.
But if you're a draft or a Classic player, you're going to get a lot out of this. But like I said, if you're a draft player, go back, listen to our entire catalogue during this preseason. We're going through our rankings of each position. We're starting to do divisional shows now. So please go ahead and do that. But what I'll bring up now for all the Classic players that are listening to this episode is a few things that you and I look for when we're trying to predict breakouts. Obviously, we're trying to predict guys that might have had a change of scenery or a different situation this year that we believe isn't getting sort of looked at well enough by the public. Some of the things I personally really look for, one was huge. I had so much success with this last year, especially at the running back position, is the PFF O-line rankings. So for all you guys that haven't really done a lot of NFL fantasy, or even guys that have, PFF is a big platform over in America, and they basically do rankings on a lot of the different positions. What I would do basically every single year when I'm looking at my running back rankings is I look at the PFF O-line ranks, because I personally think they are huge indicators for success for the running back position. I'll just bring up some examples. Last year, I was enormous on Saquon Barkley. He was going around running back 8, and I basically had him as my running back 3.
Why did you have him so high, Tate? This is, I think, the nugget.
Well, that's the thing. They were ranked number 1, the Philadelphia Eagles, in terms of their O-line. And the big thing for me was that Saquon the year prior was playing for the Giants, and they had an O-line ranked 30th. So that could not have been a bigger jump. So he's basically going from an O-line that's horrendous, an offense that doesn't move the ball, so he had no opportunities for touchdowns either, goes to a fresh spot in Philadelphia. But I think there was a public perception on him because he's an older player that's moved. All of a sudden, he goes behind that offensive line, has, basically the best running back season of all time, and obviously dominates fantasy. Another guy, Derrick Henry, obviously the king, baby. I love that guy. He went to see my favorite team, who was an absolute stinking pile of turd, but I won't go there right now. They basically had the worst offensive line in the league the previous season. And then he's gone to the Ravens that, to be fair, they had lost a couple of guys, but they were still ranked around 20th. That was still in itself a huge improvement. And he just had a better coaching system, and one that I always believed that we're going to be able to get the job done. Not to mention he had Lamar Jackson, one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the league.
Oh, yeah.
Take pressure off him. Lo and behold, everyone's like drafting this guy somewhere around the 12 to 15 market running back, and I had him firmly in my top 10, and I picked him up everywhere. And
I think you had him 5, like you were.
Yeah, I was hugely high on him. I thought it'd be an outlier season of touchdowns, and you and I even did a water bet about that.
For those who didn't catch that, I think that the number was 11.5 rushing touchdowns, and I think Derrick Henry had that by week 10. So I wore a lot of water. Thank you, Derek.
So I'll even give like an example for this season. I'm very high on J.K. Dobbins compared to where he's going. People are picking him around, say, running back 38-ish.
Yeah.
He's going up a little bit higher. So
the market is moving, but he's still well undervalued.
Whereas I've got him personally as my running back 22 because of the O-line rankings is a huge part of that. They've got the second best O-line per PFF this season. So he's just one of these breakouts I'm looking at this year. So that was just an example of what I'm doing. But for anyone out there that's new to NFL, and honestly, anyone that even has done NFL fantasy before and hasn't done this, please go and find them because they're huge indicators. A couple of other things, change of role in teams. So basically, you look at a wide receiver that might be changing from wide receiver 2 on his team to wide receiver 1. Basically, a running back that might have been a backup that's all of a sudden taking at least a half share, or might be all of a sudden the running back 1. It's just little situations like that people might miss that is good indicators as to why someone might have a breakout, especially in SuperCoach Classic, because they're being priced on what they did last year. So that's a huge change. A change of coaching staff or coaching scheme is obviously huge for players. I've talked about the KOC system before I've gone red in the face, mate. That Viking system for quarterbacks especially, but just basically the entire offense at the Minnesota Vikings is just absolute fantasy gold. So, those are some key indicators I look for as well. Change at quarterback, for a wide receiver. You bring in, basically hurt at quarterback last year, then all of a sudden they upgrade that position and you've got a wide receiver on that team. There are reasons to believe that certain wide receiver might be undervalued into this coming year. Even certain things like teams' defensive rankings.
When you wrote this down, I thought this was an interesting one. Give us the background on this one.
So when I've done my wide receiver rankings, and we even brought this up with Joycey when we had him on for our wide receiver show, I look at how good a defense is predicted to be in the season, because that often can affect game script. And again, for anyone that hasn't been a part of NFL fantasy, game script is king. It means everything in fantasy. If you've got a bad game script, and that basically means you're a running back that only rushes the ball and you're behind, all of a sudden your team is going to throw the ball the entire second half, and running back basically becomes nothing.
He may not even be on the field. They may just pull him off the field.
Conversely, you're on a bad game script for a wide receiver, and your team
lead 28-0 at halftime.
Your team's always in front. Now, I will give a caveat to that. There is a chance, it's happened to AJ Brown a lot specifically, where he's had a good enough day in the first half that it's at least been okay. But in general, you're looking for wide receivers that might have a bad defense, because it means the game script's going to be good and they're going to pass a lot. AKA the Cincinnati Bengals. They have basically one of the worst defenses in the league. And we look at guys like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase.
Don't know if you've heard of him. Yeah.
Chase Brown, even as a great pass catcher in the running back position. We look at these game scripts as absolute fantasy gold, because they might be down 17-0 in the first quarter, and they are basically passing the shit out of the ball.
It might be 17-all at quarter time, say. I mean,
exactly.
This is the thing. They may never actually be behind enough in the game, and they know they have to get a lead because they can't defend anything. So they're just... the stupidest thing is to say, well, they're going to have to outscore their opponent. Well, everyone's trying to outscore their opponent, but they might need to score 40 every game because they can't defend.
Yep. They're just things I look for, Matty. Like, I'm not saying that you have to do your entire rankings or pick your entire team with only guys that have bad defenses. It's just when I'm sort of tie-breaking a few guys that I often give the tiebreaker to, obviously guys that are going to have positive game scripts during the year.
Yeah. The only one I could think of too, when you gave me that comprehensive list, I went, I can't think of many other options that I would have for a player who I thought might be worth considering breaking out in terms of just what's a category that would drive that. And the only other thing I could think of to just add there is, who's a team you expect to be in scoring position often, right? Because that's all you need. I mean, it's like any sport, you can score from practically anywhere. But if you consider a team should be one of the better scoring teams of the year, it just puts their quarterback, their running back, their receiving targets in positions to be more useful than teams you think might struggle with that. So I guess the example that we've had in previous years is, man, the Jets, when they're going to win a game, they're going to try and beat you 17-14, right? So even when they're in scoring position, it may not be often, and they're just going to try and out-defend you. But, just teams that we know are perennially good at scoring, or we expect when things are running well, they should score well. And I think a big opportunity this year will be players from the Miami Dolphins, who last year had a very down year. if everything's back to the way that it should be, their offense should be humming a little bit more. And there'll be some guys in that squad, I think particularly, who will be undervalued because their production wasn't there last year and we expect them to outproduce it. So that's who do you think will be in scoring position? I think matters a lot for me.
Yep. Couldn't agree more, mate.
Mate, there is some really specific stuff to run through too here, I think, which is a good place to start for the first run through. The rosters, you're going to have to go and pick 24 heads, right? There's going to be 16 people who are considered in your lineup and then 8 who will be on your bench in different capacities. There are some folks who we think are must buys at the moment with the way they're priced in the app for week 1. Who's hot for you?
Yeah, I thought I'd just run through some names. So obviously we'll get more into the values of players in the next few episodes. This was just sort of a run through to give everyone an idea of who we are and sort of what we look for when we're sort of picking our, breakouts for the season in fantasy. And yeah, just sort of giving you guys that rundown. But I did want to sort of touch on some prices of the players that we've seen and guys that I just think off the top of my head are going to be complete must buys for that week 1. And, obviously you want some guys that are what we call pods in the SuperCoach Classic realm. So guys that aren't just fully owned. So this isn't going to be fill your guys with these guys and no one else. It's just the guys I think you just can't go without when you're building your team. There'll be a pretty common theme with these guys. Obviously, Supercoach is based off what guys have done last year. So the rookies this year have obviously come in at an absolute basement price, and there's some very relevant ones for fantasy this year. There's even a redshirt rookie, which basically means he hasn't played a snap yet, but he's playing his second year, which I'll start with, Matty, because obviously I'm burying the lead there. But JJ McCarthy at the quarterback position for me, 3.7 mil. It's just a must-have. It's kind of ridiculous. It's just a gimme there. JJ McCarthy, I've actually got him ranked 16 in my quarterback rankings this year. I talked about the KOC offense. I just think he's set up for success there. And honestly, at a basement price, you just cannot go wrong with him. But I just think there's so much opportunity. He's got an amazing offensive line in the top 5 per PFF. I just think he's got to be in your team. You can run him as your bench quarterback, so you don't have to start him in week 1. But honestly, in a pinch, if you got an injury and you didn't want to use a trade, having JJ McCarthy there is perfect.
I mean, and we may see him score well enough in these first couple of weeks that it would give you confidence to start him if your high-priced quarterback does get hurt, and then you can filter the money of your high-priced quarterback to other places as well. But we do expect at 3.7 mil, he's one of the cheapest quarterbacks, and that will only take him being on the field for a couple of weeks to quickly ascend in cash.
And I've taken a little bit of a dive into the scoring. It's not a formula that I've sort of worked out yet, but basically for any NFL fantasy guys, for him to hit his break even, so I'm sort of mixing obviously even the huge with SuperCoach Classic. So they run off basically a 3-game cycle where they play 3 games and then they base their break even off those 3 games. So in those first 3 games, basically JJ McCarthy in real NFL fantasy scoring would basically have to score about 3 points a game. So for him to hit his break even, and I'll just speak quickly on that for anyone who isn't, in depth in terms of SuperCoach Classic, basically that's the score a player has to hit for them to not lose money or not go up money. So if JJ McCarthy had a break even of 3 and he scored exactly 3, he would stay at the exact same dollar amount. If he scored 2, he would go down, a certain amount of dollars. If he scored 4, he'd go up that certain amount of dollars. So I just thought I would bring that up first. But like I said, the fact that he only scored about 3 points a game proves how good of a buy he is.
The scoring here that we're going to get for quarterbacks too is that passing touchdowns in this league for regular fantasy, it's only 4 points. So if he throws a passing touchdown in this scoring, he's going to score 8. So his break even's less than 4. That's super helpful to have. There's also negative point scoring for quarterbacks if they fumble the ball or if they turn it over and intercept. But there's the scoring functions in this will be much different to what we're used to in standard NFL fantasy. But given the things we know about how this is going to be scored, that's kind of money for jam right there. The next few guys, you're kind of aiming in the same basket, but these are guys who've never played in the NFL. They've had as many snaps in the NFL as you and I take.
Absolutely, and I'll start to run through them a little bit quicker, but I'll give a little bit of a spiel about why I like them. Ashton Genty, he's sort of, for anyone that's been in NFL fantasy circles, we know this guy's an absolute stud buy. He's going sort of in that like well in the top 10 in terms of rankings at running back in NFL fantasy, and you're basically getting him at close to a basement price at 4.65 mil. He's going to be the star of the Las Vegas Raiders this year. They spent a very early draft pick on him. Absolutely dominated at Boise State last year in college. And honestly, the fact that they've got Pete Carroll coming over, Geno Smith, who is an upgraded quarterback, I just think this Raiders team is actually set up for far better success on the offensive side than they probably have been. Pete Carroll I bring up because he's been very well known for just basically running his running backs into the ground. So, yeah, I just think there's a huge opportunity for Jetty here. And, I just think at that price, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and that Pete Carroll, I mean, what is he? He's like 72 years old. This guy, he's been around a long time. He was the architect of that big running game in Seattle all those years when they had guys like Marshawn Lynch and Chris Carson just pounding the ball up all the time. He doesn't tend to mix in additional backs a lot. He's kind of got his one guy, and he likes to lean on that one guy. So we see Genty, who's got this high draft capital, picked by the administration that's in the building now. We can be pretty sure he's going to see the lion's share or the Raiders' share of the production there, and rushing touchdowns and receiving touchdowns in this scoring format at 12 points taste. So we expect him to be able to return on a $4.65 million break even pretty quickly.
Absolutely, mate. All right, next one I'll touch on is another rookie that was taken quite early in the draft. It's Omarion Hampton. As my brother said, he should have stayed in the Hamptons, but that was before, obviously, Najee.
Najee became a Cyclops.
Najee Harris decided to blow one eye off, but take that for another day. Look, that's part of the reason why that we don't know exactly Harris's situation, and you and I had spoken about the split, and we weren't sure exactly how that was going to work out, but the fact is Hampton's getting all the reps in preseason, and the fact is he's at a low price of 4.4 mil himself. Yeah. So even if, let's say, Harris came back, Hampton's just a must in your team because he's got the juice. He's going to get a pretty good snap count, whether it's 50-50 of Najee or 40-60. It's just a must-have on your team. Whether you start him each week or not, that's to be seen. But he's got to be in your lineup because at that price, he's going to make a shitload of money.
And look, to me, even if it starts out the season that Omarion Hampton isn't even on the field the whole time because, they're just going to run Najee Harris into the ground. They picked him up on a 1-year deal for a couple of $1 million. And, Hampton is kind of a longer-term bet. He costs you so little to take up a spot on your bench too, even if he's not playing, then it just kind of keeps capital free to go into other positions. So I think either way, he's a really, really safe bet. And that, the sky is only the limit there, right? Like he can't do worse by sitting on the bench. That's actually not going to hurt his value. But the only thing you can do is grow. There's no downside.
And honestly, the scheme they run there, I talked about schemes earlier. You got Harbaugh, who's a sort of hard-nosed, wants to run the ball coach.
Yeah, like Pete Carroll.
Greg Roman, who's the OC, just wants to run the shit out of it. Like, it's honestly set up perfectly for running backs there. I don't think Herbert's going to have to throw much because they're just going to be able to run the ball well. I just think it's set up perfectly for him, especially at that price.
Watching the last 2 years, I don't want to see Herbert throw much either.
He can do it, but he's not going to have to. Yeah. My next is my boy, taking him in a couple of dynasty leagues already. Ted McMillan, another guy that you're seeing the theme here, drafted super early in the NFL draft, goes to be the wide receiver one at the Carolina Panthers. 4.6 million. It's just an absolute no-brainer. He's going to be the wide receiver one, like I mentioned. I think he's going to have an amazing sort of, he's got an amazing partnership with Bryce Young. Bryce Young's already someone that's probably trying to take that next step in the NFL this season. He showed it at the end of last year. And I think this is only going to help. You look at Dave Canales as the coach and old OC, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think he's going to obviously scheme up a lot for Tet. Tet's amazing contested catcher. He showed that in college, and he's already sort of shown it. He's had a couple of catches in the preseason that are amazing. So, mate, he's an absolute no-brainer. Another one that's going to make a shit ton of money because he's going to have such a low break even.
Like a young Matty C out there catching balls like that. So you should have seen me in my prime, mate. You should have. The last guy you got on this list, though, not a wide receiver. Catches things, though. Our favourite position to talk about.
We brought the, and not so loose end or whatever, not so tight end.
Tight end is making my end feel loose, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Absolutely love these guys. I've always spoke about tight ends and how much I love them in fantasy. You know that, Matty.
Yeah, but we don't rail on them at all.
This guy I did bring up in our tight end show. I brought him up as my tight end 7 this year, and he is a rookie. For a while there, rookies took a while to break out, but it's actually happened in the last 2 years with Sam Laporta 2 years ago and Brock Bowers last season actually broke out. So it looks to me like they're drafting these guys early and they're wanting to use them straight away. And Tyler Warren, to me, is the kind of guy that could be like a Brock Bowers from last year, where, yes, he has a shit quarterback situation. Honestly, don't think it can get any worse than what Brock Bowers had. And Tyler Warren walks into the Colts where it's either Richardson or Daniel Jones, which sounds bad, but I sort of had some stats on our tight end show that sort of debunked the whole idea that you need a fantastic quarterback to break out in tight end. Tyler Warren's perfect. I think he's the chance of actually being the target leader in the Colts receiving room, even over obviously Pittman and Downs in their wide receiver room. So I just think there's an amazing opportunity for Tyler Warren, and $4.5 million. You're picking 2 starting tight ends in SuperCoach.
Yep.
And so I think he's a perfect guy to pair with one of the top end guys like a Kittle, McBride, or Bowers himself. So I just think he's a perfect second tight end.
Nice. Look, and I think if you want to catch more about tight ends too, because that is one of these positions where most teams only really have one who's worthy to talk about, and not every team does either. It is really worthwhile to go back and find our shows on that. We had Ian and Kev talk with us on the Friday show back in the last week of July about that one. So go and find that one on the Aussie Gridiron Network feed under Aussie NFL Fantasy Show Tight Ends. Mate, there are a couple that you think should be on your team, but may not be as dominant to just kick off the season. Still, you want to own a share of them. You want to walk us through a couple of those as well before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just had 4 that I sort of put down in this bucket of I think you should start with them, but I can understand if you didn't. They're basically guys that I believe have a very good chance of obviously breaking their very low break evens, and I just think their chances of, as the season going, having even bigger roles as the year goes on. So these are the kind of guys that I think you should just have at the price they are, but on your bench or in your reserves, if you want to call it. So Travion Henderson is the first one. You just saw him like today return a kickoff. Obviously, that's not relevant to fantasy, but he just showed his space, his speed, and I just think he's going to have a pretty solid share straight away as a rookie in the running back position. Whether Ramondre has the biggest share, I don't know, but I just think at $4.15 million, he's just pretty close to a must-have. One that I can understand if you waited on, but just one that I think you have.
Yeah, but, I don't remember. We've been watching NFL a very long time, Tay, and I don't remember the Patriots having a speed back like this for forever. I mean, maybe when James White was at his peak, that might be the closest we've got. So this is, to me, something that's new to the Patriots as well. So I think they'll want to use him. They've got a new coach, and I think they're going to try and reestablish what it means to be a Patriot. Yeah,
and you're getting, I think it's 2 points per catch. So you're actually, this guy's going to be a great catcher. So yeah, he's set up for success. Next one's Caleb Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers, $3.7 million to start. I just think he's another good bench running back to have on your team. You've got 2, so I think Henderson and Caleb Johnson are the best 2 to have there. Johnson, again, I just think he's going to split the time there with Jaylen Warren. I actually think there's a world where he sort of starts to eke out even bigger than half the role. I just think he's going to be the first 2 down back. Warren's probably going to be used as the 3rd down back in a little bit of the running game. I just think there's a great opportunity. Arthur Smith loves to run the ball, their OC. So, yeah, I just think he's a no-brainer at that price.
I think this is also one where you go, right, so this is going to be one where in NFL fantasy, where it is a draft and everyone can only exist once in the league, Caleb Johnson and Jaylen Warren are getting drafted pretty much side by side, and they're about running backs 30-31, right? But in this format, because it's all based off last year's stats, Warren is costing $8.5 million, and this guy's costing less than $4 million. So you actually can't spend the money on Jaylen Warren, who might get half the role, and this guy's half the price and will eat just as much. This is where the game is completely different.
Absolutely. Next couple rookies as well. Emeka Egbuka of the Buccaneers. He's
great name to say, isn't it?
It really is. You can get it wrong so many ways. But
oh my God.
In the end, he, again, first round draft pick. Basically, Chris Godwin, one of the incumbent wide receivers, looks to me like he's not going to be there week 1.
No.
So there's an opportunity for him to eke out a very big role straight away. So he's a very good one to start with, because I actually think there's a better chance he might lose some of the share as the year goes on. So he's actually a perfect guy to start with, because I think he could get a huge amount of cash early, and then you could even sell him to someone else a little bit later. But he's a rookie. He's going to have some growing pains, but I just think, again, he's a perfect rookie to sit on your bench. Let the money grow. grow and then sell him if you have to.
Yeah, and the guy who I sort of circled in this range too is Jaden Higgins at the Houston Texans for everything you just said, because they've got their problems at wide receiver. They've got Christian Kirk come across from the Jaguars, who didn't have a stellar year last year. They've got Nico Collins, who we think is going to be the biggest dog in the room. And then they've kind of got this smattering of like John Mechie Juniors and stuff. Like, it's just that second position isn't nailed down, and it's 4.25 million. Jaden Higgins is everything you just said about Emeka Egbuka, and I just figure all the same reasons, mate.
Yeah, and honestly, the only reason I put Egbuka, like, that's a very good point on Higgins, because I'm a huge fan of him. Here. My only difference was what I brought up with Egbuka. I think there's a chance he actually carves out a bigger role early. Fades out with Godwin back, maybe. Whereas Higgins, I think, might have some sort of rookie growing pains. He is
into it, yeah.
But there is, say, Christian Kirk there that might sort of just be better initially because he's sort of been there, done that. That's my only concern. I'm not saying don't take Higgins. Like you said,
they're so cheap.
He should be on this list for sure with Egbuka. He's great. So, honestly, I don't think you can go wrong with either of them. Last guy I'll bring up just in the tight end position, because you've got to have a bench tight end as well as starters, is Mason Taylor. I think he is a perfect benchy, because I think the only reason now people are staying off him is he's got that ankle sprain in the preseason. I wouldn't worry so much about that. I think there's a good chance he's still there week one. Even if he isn't, I would still just sit him there as my bench tight end and let him flourish sort of when he comes back. I've been bringing him up for a long time. I really, really like his work that he did in college, but it's more about the situation he has at the Jets. There's no one behind Garrett Wilson except him. He has no competition at tight end. I just think there's a huge opportunity. He walks straight into the second most targets in this Jets offense. And honestly, Justin Fields has a propensity to actually throw to the tight end position. He showed it in Chicago and then showed it for little bits while he was in the Steelers for Frymouth. So I think Mason Taylor is a great one to have as a stash on your bench.
Yeah, 100%. And if you're going to have a guy who sits on your bench for the first couple of weeks, who you're not even in danger of starting because, maybe he's coming to the season a little bit limp from this preseason injury, you're not looking like you're going to start him anyway, because no teams have buys, and it would take a catastrophic injury to one of your other tight ends to do it. So for that price, it just seems ridiculous to let him go, right?
Absolutely, mate.
I think we've done it for the first one. We've gotten through a lot of the difference between how these formats roll and what knowledge you're going to need from each of them to be successful. If you're an NFL person who's coming into SuperCoach, and the other way around, if you're super coachy and you just need some help with the NFL familiarity. Mate, we're going to do this every week, right? About a half hour?
Absolutely, mate. And like I said, for anyone that might have only copped some of the specific SuperCoach at the end, don't worry. We were just more sort of going through sort of, I guess, what we've done in our past and what we look for moving forward. We wanted to touch on obviously some must-haves at the end, but we'll really, really delve into the SuperCoach specific stuff in these episodes incoming about, obviously the prices, like break-even, stuff like that, and obviously matchups for that week one, which is going to be huge, because I think that's where you're going to really find differences in other people's teams.
Gosh. Look at that. All that in half an hour. Guaranteed. All your money back, right?
No, we're going to need to keep that.
We're going to keep that. Mate, just with the equipment I've been working on this week, I don't know that we've actually got any budget for the SuperCoach podcast from the AGN, mate.
Let's just hope this show gets out, Matty C, and then we'll work out money later.
Oh, don't curse it. Mate, on behalf of the AGN, this is Matty C signing off. TG, I'll catch you on the Aussie NFL Fantasy Show. Hooroo, mate.
Hooroo. SCD's nuts. Let's go.
SuperCoach Halfa. Get your edge, get it faster. Taylor leads, Matty's laughter. NFL SuperCoach Halfa. NFL SuperCoach Halfa. Get your edge, get it faster. Taylor leads, Matty's laughter.